Welcome everyone to our webinar, Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body. I'm excited about this webinar. It's a partnership between Planning Alternatives and the Alzheimer's Association, the Greater Michigan chapter here. My name is Nathan Mercereau, President of Planning Alternatives, and I'm here with Teresa Grzinski. She's the program coordinator and provides a lot of great education around the issues with Alzheimer's. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. You might ask, why is this partnership happening? And we're very excited about it. And as financial advisors, we help our clients through all stages of life. And we have noticed that the aging process becomes challenging at times. And we really wanted to bring to light resources that are available for our clients. And over the last couple of years, we've developed a relationship with the Alzheimer's Association and have had training here in the office with our team, and Teresa has actually provided that to us. Thank you. And we wanted to pass that information on to our clients as well. So welcome everyone. Today's format is going to be a conversation between Teresa and I, and Teresa has a number of prepared slides, and she's going to be focusing on caring for your mind and through the Alzheimer's presentation, and then I'm going to speak to a few points about caring for your money. And during this process, if you have questions, I encourage you to submit your questions through the online chat channel. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a time for Q&A, but we have lots to cover. Without further ado, Teresa, why don't you kick us off and tell us about this healthy living.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me, Nathan, and welcome to everyone that's on the line. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today about the healthy living strategies for brain and body. What I'll be talking about today is actually taken from a presentation that was created from our national office, and it's all about strategies for overall wellness and healthy aging. Unfortunately, there's no proven method for preventing Alzheimer's disease, so it's not necessarily strategies geared towards that end, but just for overall healthy aging, and certainly no matter what our age, we can really benefit from what we'll be talking about today.
Sure.
And unfortunately, as we age, I know you know this, Nathan, that there are some things we can control and there are some things that are really outside of our control. So as far as things that we don't have a lot of control over, our genetics would definitely be one of them. We inherit our genes from our parents and don't really have a whole lot of say over what we inherit in that regard. And our environment, too, to some extent, really is maybe somewhat modifiable, but we might just be dealt a certain hand in relation to that. But lifestyle choices, that certainly is an area where we can make really thoughtful choices, and choices that can really help to protect our bodies and our mind. And one mantra you might hear me say today is that if we have a healthy body, or in particular a healthy heart, we're more likely to have a healthy brain, a healthy mind. So there's certainly a strong connection there.
That's great. One of the experiences that I've had is a much greater awareness about the issues of dementia and Alzheimer's. Family members have been affected, and it's been a real learning experience. And I think what we're going to be talking about today are some forward-looking things, but yet very practical things for today in this whole preventative discussion.
Exactly. What we're talking about is really very proactive, and it's with an eye towards the future. And like I said, no matter what our age, these are strategies we can implement today, but definitely will help us in the long run, that's for sure. So before I get too much into our conversation, I did want to talk about the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia, because it's a question that I get pretty frequently in my role. And I like that this slide does a pretty good job in demonstrating the difference between the two. So dementia really is an umbrella term with many different diseases falling beneath that umbrella. So we can see that Alzheimer's disease is just one form of dementia, but there are many other forms of dementia as well, including vascular dementia, Lewy body disease, and so on and so forth. And there's actually upwards of 60 or 70 other forms of dementia, but most of them are quite rare. So most often when we're talking dementia, we are talking Alzheimer's disease, but certainly important to know which type of dementia. All right, moving on. And one other thing about our agency, our national office actually creates an annual statistics report about the facts and figures regarding Alzheimer's disease. And these are some stats that were released with our 2016 report. And some of them are very shocking, certainly in my mind. Currently, there are more than 5 million Americans that are living with Alzheimer's disease. Approximately every 67 seconds, somebody in our nation develops the disease. Today, it's the 6th leading cause of death among the top 10, and the only cause of death that can't be prevented, cured, or even slowed. By 2050, we project the nationwide prevalence of the disease to be as high as 16 million.
Significant.
Definitely. And also with our facts and figures report, we usually highlight one feature of the disease, and you can see towards the bottom of this slide, they've highlighted some financial aspects associated with Alzheimer's disease and just what a great financial toll it can take for many families.
That's an important issue.
Absolutely. So talking a little bit more about dementia and Alzheimer's disease, again, as was illustrated with the previous slide, we know that dementia is that umbrella term, and dementia can be caused by a number of different diseases. Alzheimer's disease is just one form of dementia. And it's also important to point out that Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging, and many people are confused by that. They think that as we get older that we naturally become forgetful or senile, but we know that that's not the case.
Ever since we've talked about getting this, presenting this webinar, I have been wondering every time I lose my keys if I am on the cusp of Alzheimer's.
Oh, yeah, and you know what? I am so guilty of that, Nathan. I always lose my keys, my cell phone. And it's interesting you point that out because I know for the August webinar, we're going to be talking about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. And misplacing things could be a sign, but really the key there is if we're unable to retrace our steps. Unfortunately, I know in my case, I'm able to retrace my steps. I can tap into that short-term memory. So just occasionally forgetting keys or cell phones definitely is not a cause for alarm, that's for sure.
And retracing my steps is usually how I find my keys.
Oh,
so
same here.
Right,
yeah,
so
I think,
green
okay,
light.
well, I drove home, so I had them walking in the door and so on and so forth.
That's great.
And as the last bullet on this slide, as we have mentioned before, Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. It accounts for about 70% of dementia cases. And I just wanted to highlight a little bit some of the risk factors and treatments that are available regarding Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, some of the risk factors are really outside of our control, like we talked about before. And in fact, the primary risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease is one we really have no control over, and that's our advancing age. As we become older, our risk for developing Alzheimer's disease goes up rather dramatically. Genetics too plays some role. It's not completely clear what role genetics do play, but research is continuing. But other things that we may be able to modify, including things like head injury, cardiovascular factors or heart health, and even the number of years of formal education. There's some research to suggest that the more education we have, maybe that's a little bit protective in terms of cognitive decline later on in life.
So it's that whole stimulation of the brain and keeping the brain engaged in learning and experiences that is actually starting to prove itself to be beneficial.
Absolutely. And that one is actually kind of interesting because with formal education, you're so right that it's stimulating in so many different ways. We're meeting new people, we're learning new things. So it's not completely clear what about that is beneficial, and it might be a combination of all of those things that are helping us to reap that benefit. And as I've mentioned before, unfortunately, there is no cure at this point for Alzheimer's disease, but there are some treatments available to help manage the symptoms. So some folks might be familiar with medications like Aricept or Namenda, but unfortunately, those medications are not what we call disease modifying, so they don't stop or really slow down the progression of the disease. But that's why what we're talking about today is even more important, because there are some things that we can do to really help protect us potentially against some cognitive decline or help to ensure that we age healthy in general. So what we'll do is talk about each of these 4 areas: physical health and exercise, diet and nutrition, cognitive activity, and social engagement. And we'll touch on each one of these and explain some things that maybe you can implement right away to help reach those goals regarding healthy aging. So the first one that we'll touch on actually has the greatest amount of research behind it, and that's the physical health and exercise. And actually there is some research to suggest that for folks that engage in any type of physical activity, even if it's mild physical activity like walking, that can reap a lot of cognitive benefits and might actually help to improve cognitive functioning. And there was actually one study done that showed that seniors who had previously been inactive, once they started becoming more active and more physically active, their cognitive functioning actually did increase. It helped to improve their cognition. So certainly very relevant to what we're talking about today with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. So again, the most robust amount of evidence really points to physical exercise as being a really good method for potentially reducing that risk for dementia or cognitive decline. And the reason why this is beneficial, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a different slide, but it's helpful because it's helping to increase blood flow to your brain. And as we're getting moving and getting our blood pumping, that's just really good for our entire body, and certainly it's good for our minds as well.
These are great points, Teresa. If I am at a stage of life where I have some physical impairments, some physical challenges, and activity and exercise just, the Olympics are coming up, and that's just so beyond what I could ever think for physical activity. How do you advise or comment on people at a life stage where physical activity may be challenging? How do they kind of think about this or even implement some things on a practical basis?
Oh, sure, and that's a great question. And some people, maybe the first thing they think of when they think of being physically active is being an Olympian or running a marathon and things that are just so ambitious, but it doesn't necessarily have to be some type of effort to that extent. It might just be a little bit of walking or maybe even some mild stretching. It's really about finding something that fits with your lifestyle and fits with your ability level. Absolutely, and I think that really echoes the point in the last bullet point, which is that there's no single recipe. What's a good exercise regimen for one person may not necessarily be a good fit for another person. And I think it's really all about finding something that's really enjoyable for you and maybe having an attitude where you are experimental and you do try out different things. So certainly finding something that you like is very key. I know one of the activities I really enjoy is long distance running. That's something that gets me out and going. Are there any things that you like to do, Nathan, that help you to stay physically active?
Yeah, things like hiking, walking, just more movement. And in an office environment, I know it's challenging just to create that physical activity if you're at a computer, seated. So I think just in the work environment, there are things that we can do to create more activity. And then, with our clients that are in retirement, it's always exciting to hear about their travel and as they experience even things locally and walk through parks, all of those things add up to great physical activity.
Right, absolutely. And thank you so much for those examples. And I think it can be challenging when we think about being in the office or some of our lifestyles that are pretty sedentary. It's hard to think about creative ways for interspersing some physical activity, but maybe it's just parking a little bit further away or breaking up your day with walking breaks, having a walking meeting. Any of those things might help to increase your step count and increase your physical activity for the day.
Yeah, a friend, she will park the farthest in the parking lot at the mall so that she can get those extra steps, and it's just an intentional habit that she has, and I think it's a great one.
Yeah, that is a great one. I know my husband, his company does a program called Walk This Way, and they really encourage their employees to get up and walk about, and he'll take walking breaks. He'll go up and down the stairs at his office or just walk a little loop around his office space. So even just something small like that certainly can add up. And as I said, even those small efforts are shown by research to really be very beneficial in the long run.
So it's always a fascinating connection between exercise and the brain. I had never thought of the high correlation, and I know you've got a couple slides here to talk about that.
Absolutely, and I think it may be the next slide that really addresses that point in some detail. So I will go on to that because I am very fascinated by that connection. And as you can see in this slide, I think it really shows how vascular the brain is. So you can see just how rich a network of different blood vessels that are in the brain. And in fact, about 1/5 of the blood that your heart pumps goes directly to your brain. So any lifestyle modification that's going to be beneficial for your heart health is going to be beneficial for your brain health as well. So I think that connection is really important to keep in mind. Heart health, brain health, interrelated. Keeping that in mind as we engage in physical activity, and that's really why it is so helpful for us as we age well. So moving on now to diet and nutrition. And I think for many of us, we know what food choices are good or bad for us, but it helps to be reminded of them. And again, just like with the physical activity, any strategy we select that is going to be helpful for our heart health is going to help nourish our brain as well.
So what we eat affects our brain to some degree.
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Our diet choices can certainly affect the health of our entire body for sure, and it does affect the brain.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking about the blood flow and how vascular things affect the brain. Food obviously will affect a lot of aspects of our body.
It sure will. And even just speaking personally, I know if I have a few days where maybe I'm not eating as nutritiously, I can tell I'm feeling more sluggish, or it's harder to get my thoughts together. So if we think about the cumulative effect of that over a number of years and perhaps making poor food choices, we know it certainly does add up. So these are just some recommendations for foods that might be really good for our heart under the eat list. So things like vegetables, fruits, having a plant-based diet. There's a lot of research behind that being really helpful, especially this time of year with so many fruits and vegetables and seasons. It's really good to take advantage of that.
And I know diet books are everywhere, in the bookstore, online. It seems like there's always a diet bestseller. Is there any type of diet? I know there's never one perfect diet, but what types of diets should we be looking for to help us?
You know, that's a good question, and actually there is some research behind the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. Since those are both proven to be so helpful for our heart health, they're actually shown to be good for our brain health as well. So like you said, Nathan, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, but if you're looking for a general overall strategy, those might be good places to start. And with either of those diets, they certainly encourage you not to eat some of the foods that are on the avoid list. So fried foods, processed foods, things of that nature, best to avoid them or eat in moderation. So moving on now to talk a little bit about why cognitive stimulation can be really helpful. We know that by keeping our mind active, that can help to form new connections among brain cells. So if we're learning a new skill or if we're traveling to a new place, that's actually very stimulating for our mind and can really help to bolster our brain health in some ways. One key thing, and I'm not sure if it's on this slide or maybe the next, but really a key thing when we think about cognitive stimulation is to select activities that are new and challenging. So if let's say we're really into crossword puzzles and doing them is really easy for us, we can do it really without a whole lot of effort. That's not necessarily what we're talking about when we say something that's really challenging or stimulating. We want to get outside of the box, maybe learn how to ballroom dance or travel to a place we've never been before, just so we're really taxing our brain in a new and interesting way. And engage in ongoing learning. I think no matter what age we are, there's opportunities to learn new skills. Maybe this will give us permission to try a new hobby or some activity that we've always wanted to try but just never had the inclination to do before. So I think certainly engaging in new activities is very beneficial.
And one of the things that I've seen that has been a key activator is simply mindset that we all have. And if we think we can't learn anything or we can't do this or can't do that, it's going to probably come to pass. But if we have a change in mindset, the way we look at the situation, that we can do something, even if it's small, even if it's reconnecting to an old friend, with an old friend, even if it's trying a different style of book reading on a different subject, or trying some of these hobbies that friends and family might be doing. That's always an easy way to get engaged, but with a mindset of possibilities and more openness and optimism, I think that's really important. And I'm always reminded of the Henry Ford quote. He said, "Where if you believe you can or you can't, you're right." And
what a great quote. Yeah, and I think there's so much truth to that. If we feel like, oh, I'm not going to be very successful, or of course I can't do such and such, then you probably won't be successful. It's about having the belief that you can be successful and achieve what you set out to achieve. So the last area that we're going to go over concerns social engagement. And of the four, this has probably the least amount of evidence-based research behind it, but there certainly are studies that show that it can be helpful to be socially connected to the people around us. And we know that the opposite is true, that if we're too isolated, if we don't have social connections, that can be really negative for us. So certainly staying connected to loved ones and friends, maybe going out and meeting new people, that is certainly very helpful for our brain health. So these are just a few examples of things that you might consider doing, maybe having a regular meeting with your friends and family, or engage with new people, maybe go on different outings, or challenge yourself to do new activities where you're going to be in a position where you have a chance to meet some new people.
So this is really lifestyle driven, thinking about your connections and how to actively engage in meaningful connections.
Absolutely, definitely. And it's really fascinating because when we are engaged socially, it really taps into so many different areas of the brain. We really have to often thoughtfully think about our response when someone is talking to us and when we interpret another person's body language and things like that. So our brain is actually working pretty hard when we're socially engaged, and it can be a really, really good thing for us.
I know this conversation is around the preventative things around dementia and Alzheimer's, but if someone is maybe at a later life stage or even potentially experiencing some of these symptoms, what has been your advice of, helping to cope and address some things? Is it still try to do the same thing in your individual situation, or is it something a little bit different? What's your experience?
I definitely think that there are things to be done, even if we might be noticing some signs of the disease or suspect that they're there. And I think that's really going to be addressed very well, certainly in the next webinar topic, the 10 signs. But I think first and foremost, getting a diagnosis and making sure, whether it's dementia or if it's something else, just being able to identify what's going on. And most often, if you have a neurologist that will really work with you, they'll be able to identify some lifestyle choices that might help you to think more clearly. So even if you do have a diagnosis, there might be some things or diet choices or physical activity and so on that can give you the best bet possible and help you to think as clearly as you can in spite of whatever difficulties might be going on.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So lastly, we talk about putting all of the pieces together, because if we really want to get the most bang for our buck, then we want to maybe do more than one of these things at a time. So for instance, my husband and I were training for a half marathon race that's coming up next month. And the fact that what we're doing is so physically active, that definitely touches on the physical health and exercise pillar. but also the fact that we're going out and we're doing this really social thing by meeting new people that are going to be at the race, that social engagement, and also kind of cognitively taxing because it's at a place that I haven't been before, and just thinking about how to navigate there and so on and so forth will get my cognitive activity up for sure. So that's just one example of incorporating more than one of these things, but certainly if you're thinking about implementing some different lifestyle changes in your own life, maybe considering touching on more than one of these at a time to really maximize your benefits. So just in summary, these are some tips to take with you today. Begin today. It really doesn't matter what our age. We can reap benefits from lifestyle modifications no matter what stage we're at. And I think it's helpful to know that we can reap benefits even if we're doing something small and then maybe building on that. So maybe we decide to walk for 5 minutes today, and then maybe tomorrow it's 10, and then we just continue to build on that. Pick something that we enjoy doing that will make us more likely to want to stick with it. As I said, I'm a runner, but I know many people don't care for running. So if you don't like running and you try doing that, you're probably not going to stick with it very well.
I care for driving. That's mine.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I'll drive half marathon.
There you go. There you go. And then, again, just to recap, making healthy choices, have a plan. Support from others can really be helpful if we get our family members on board too. That maybe will make us more likely to stick with things. And most importantly, I think, is to have fun. If we're enjoying what we're doing, that too will make us more likely to follow through on those changes.
That's great, Teresa. This has been really helpful. Now, just if you could share a little bit about your organization and what you do locally so that we're aware in the audience.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. I come from the Alzheimer's Association Greater Michigan chapter, but the Alzheimer's Association is actually a nationwide organization with chapters all across the country. And in fact, we're the world's leading voluntary healthcare organization specializing in Alzheimer's care support and research. As I said, I represent the Greater Michigan chapter, and we have offices across much of the state. There's also another chapter that covers the other areas of Michigan that we don't. And for anyone that would like more resources or more information about some of the great programs we're offering, like support groups and education workshops, I would definitely recommend contacting our helpline number, which is on the slide now, the 800-272-3900. Or if you're more web savvy, you can check us out online at alz.org/GMC, as in Greater Michigan chapter, and that will have all of the information about our local Walk to End Alzheimer's and other local events that we're putting on.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to share a few items around taking care of your money. So this is part of the partnership of your financial health, and in the sense that you talked about the 4 aspects of taking care of yourself as you age, I'm going to quickly comment on the 4 aspects to consider as you age and make sure you're building a solid financial plan. And we help our clients build a plan looking at where they're at today, where they want to be, what are their values and their goals, and how to get there most prudently. And we've identified, given our research and our work with our clients, that there's 4 areas to emphasize and that we see as people age that need some particular attentiveness, especially if there might be some cognitive challenges that are appearing. So the first one is money management, and we talk about money. Every day we spend, just as consumers, we have to use money, so it does make the world go round, whether we like to admit that or not. And when it comes to putting a plan together for your finances, it's really important to ask yourself a few questions. When you think about what's ahead, do you know what you need to live comfortably? And what that means is understanding your financial status, so you know what your expenses are, what your income sources are, and making sure that you have a plan in place where you have enough to sustain yourself for the rest of your life. And we want to help clients answer the key questions of, do they have enough, and knowing that they're on track. We also look at the investment portfolio, and that's an important aspect of putting a plan together and focusing on the money management side of things. Many times we find that people are not as well organized with their financial documents, with knowing what they have. They might get a statement on a monthly or quarterly basis and they look at the front page, but they really don't take the time to understand how things are positioned and how to organize things. And as we age, it's important to make sure that you're on top of your financial affairs with your money management. And we'll talk later about the importance of communicating that to key contacts. So we created a resource here at Planning Alternatives called the Financial Empowerment Workbook. And this is a wonderful resource that we provided to clients, and we are providing at no charge to anyone who's listening today that has an interest in getting a free copy of this. This is simply an organization document that helps you list what you own, what you owe, help you calculate some expenses. A lot of people wonder what type of documents that they need to keep, how long do you keep your tax returns, where is the will or trust located, where are my insurance policies located, other things around cyber protection, how do I protect my personal information from the threat of hackers or people that would want to steal my identity, things around credit scoring and knowing how to keep track of your finances on the credit basis, and simply organizing things so that you can find them when you need them.
Yeah, and you know, Nathan, everything that you just mentioned, those are questions I've had on my mind, like the tax returns, how long do you keep those, protecting against credit fraud and things like that. So it sounds like a really valuable resource.
We've had a number of clients give us feedback that, and most recently there was a husband and wife that we've been working with for years, but the husband recently became ill, and although we took care of a number of things for them, the husband was the primary gatekeeper in the relationship, and we actually used this workbook with the wife and to just see where things are and give her a sense of control and clarity about where all these pieces of their financial life were, so that she felt empowered using it and she wasn't relying on another source. So she said she felt so much better when she could see things on paper and make decisions based on that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know in my line of work, sometimes I see where the spouse that had been managing the finances, maybe they're the one diagnosed with dementia, and then the other spouse has to pick up the pieces. So it sounds like this type of resource would be really helpful for someone in that situation.
Yeah, it's the simple things that sometimes get overlooked, and simply organizing your information is a very important step. Second area that we look at in building a solid financial plan is estate and legacy planning, and there are a number of issues that can pop up in very challenging circumstances. So we encourage people to ask themselves, if you become sick, who's in charge of your health and finances, and do you have the right documents in place? And simply double checking now that you have those documents in order, that you have beneficiary designations that are appropriate, that you know where things stand and have clarity on it, will give you a tremendous sense of peace of mind, and also give you a perspective about how you want things to be handled in the circumstance where you weren't physically able to do that, or upon your demise, what would happen after your death. Not great motivational topics to cover all the time, but very important ones. And there are things that we can do right now just to make sure things are in order, reviewing your existing estate documents, looking at beneficiary designations, and that's something that's on an account that says if you were to pass away, it goes to this person or this institution or this trust. We recently had a meeting with a couple, and they have a large IRA, individual retirement account, where they've saved into for a number of years, and we just wanted to do a double check on all of their beneficiary designations, and we called the custodian, the place that held the money, and asked what the designation was, and they said, oh, this is 100% to Devil, D-E-V-I-L. And we said, what?
What?
Devil. And they had one son named Devin. When the beneficiary paperwork got processed at the custodial level, they dropped the last letter of the name of N and replaced it with an L, and they forgot the last name completely.
Oh my goodness.
So you may think your beneficiaries might be devils, but most of us don't have a
Right.
a child or direct inheritor that would actually list that way. So sometimes it just pays to double check. Many times it pays to double check, and that's something that is a very practical thing to do. In building a plan, looking at your insurance strategies is important, and there are a number of scenarios for you to think about, and here's some questions about if I live too long, if I die too early, if I get sick. And I know these are not inspirational questions, but they're really important ones in the aging process. And a lot of expense is cast in the area of healthcare, and we want to make sure that you know where you stand under different scenarios. And many times we have to decide, do we transfer the risk to another party like an insurance company, or do we absorb that risk? And for each person, the answer to that is very individualized. There's no one size fits all, but making sure that you have adequate insurance in place is really important if you are deciding to transfer that risk. And then if you are saying, well, I'm going to take that risk, make sure that you have sufficient financial assets to weather a storm in the event of any of these living scenarios as well. The final area that I'll comment on is the family communication and advocacy. This is a really important one, and many times families find themselves in stressful situations because there is a health need of a loved one, there are decisions to be made, and there are documents to identify. Where are they? What does mom and dad have? Or what does my family member want or wish? And what am I to do if I'm in a position to be their advocate? So we have a number of clients that know that they might need to get involved in, say, their parents' finances a little bit more, because their parents may be aging, but this is a very sensitive, and it's a private, financial status is a private thing, and it's not an easy conversation to have. But at the end of the day, if you're listening, I'd encourage you to think about addressing these questions. Who is on your team? Who's in charge? Do they have all the information they need? How does conflict get resolved? And think in a way of coordinating everyone on your team with your professional contacts. So you don't want to put your family members or key friends in a position where they have to scramble, where they have to figure things out in a very stressful environment. Take the step, and it's really a step of proactivity, a step of love, a step of organization and care, making sure that your documents are in order, that the right people that you've chosen know the information, and have a meaningful conversation with those people. It doesn't have to happen every 6 months, but there needs to be some sort of communication that's given so that the people that you are going to appoint and rely on to take care of your wishes are fully equipped to do that, and they're not left in the dark in the event of a tough situation. So we want to thank everyone for attending our webinar, and these comments on the taking care of your money side, we want to really tune into helping you and offer our financial empowerment workbook to do so. So after this webinar, you will receive a survey, and it'll come this afternoon. And if you could complete that survey and give us your comments and questions or any suggestions that you have, that would be great. And there will also be a place to request a copy of the Financial Empowerment Workbook. Christy Geisens from our office will reach out and contact you and make sure we have all the appropriate information to send your way. And we look forward to hearing your feedback about today, and also look forward to the upcoming webinars that we have planned for the next 2 months. Teresa already mentioned the tuning into the warning signs, and also to look at the resources and programs that are available out there as well. So with that, I want to thank you, Teresa, for your time today. It was great to hang out, and I look forward to further discussions. I know Laura's going to be at the next webinar, and then you'll be back in September. But I appreciate the partnership that we have, and we look forward to providing great resources and support for each other along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This concludes our webinar. Please fill out the survey, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.